Recently, we brought you a report on the mysterious crash of a suspected UFO in Shag Harbour, Nova Scotia. Working with Canadian researcher Chris Stiles, Sightings has uncovered startling new government reports and has interviewed key eyewitnesses. There's enough evidence here to warrant a new kind of sightings investigation, our first UFO salvage operation. Whatever crashed into Shag Harbour nearly 30 years ago was seen by many eyewitnesses who have all come forward with strikingly similar descriptions of the incident.
An unusual object described as being 60 feet in diameter with 4 bright white lights was seen to hover in the sky over the Shag Harbour area, tilt at a 45-degree angle, and then drop into the sky and hit the surface of the water. Eventually, the Coast Guard, Rescue Coordination Center, Navy, and RCAF were brought into the search effort for the object responsible.
Chris Stiles has conducted an exhaustive search for documentation regarding the historic and mysterious crash of October 4th, 1967. He has found a significant government paper trail.
The Navy did have a strong expectation of finding artifacts. In the document, it actually names a scientific consultant who was on standby to receive debris. The search conducted by the Navy concentrated in this area.
In October 1995, Sightings launched its first ever salvage operation under the direction of Chris Stiles. Our goal was to locate and retrieve any pieces of UFO wreckage large enough to have resisted the forceful tides and currents in Shag Harbour. By all accounts, the odds were stacked against us, but this operation would offer a unique opportunity to apply scientific methods to an incident rife with rumor and conjecture. If debris could be found, our team would find it.
We hope to take the searched areas beyond the former military search and perhaps check out some of these target detections and the impact site, which was actually outside of the search already conducted by the Navy.
28 years had passed since the crash at Shag Harbour. Time was not on our side, but state-of-the-art detection equipment, unimagined in 1967, would improve our chances.
Prepare for tracking sequence at heading 159, over.
There is 500 kilohertz digital side-scan sonar for seabed profiling and target detection. Aerial trajectory plotting.
Roger, survey 1, commencing sequence, over.
A towed array GEM magnetometer for underwater metal detection, and a GPS satellite tracking system to pinpoint potential targets. Our intention was to scan and search 3 main areas of the ocean floor in the waters off Shag Harbour. These areas corresponded to eyewitness recollections and coordinates taken from a document reporting where the initial government search took place in 1967.
Sonar buoy drops out of nearby Canadian Forces Base Greenwood, and the magnetic anomaly detection grid at the nearby Shelburne Base, which was the coordination center for submarine detection in the Atlantic, led the authorities to believe that perhaps the largely intact object was still moving under the water.
But where it came to rest remains a mystery. Reports that wreckage was recovered from Shag Harbour on the night of the crash dictate that we begin our operation there.
Men at the base have told me that it was probably the most intense thing next to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which left the base on alert for 34 days.
The Sightings investigation heads out to sea after months of onshore planning. The 3 targeted areas are scanned for potential pieces of wreckage, called targets, and each target is given a priority designation.
We were able to lay down an extensive grid pattern and pick up numerous target detections, which we gave an assessment value for high strangeness. A very simple system of 1, 2, or 3.
The initial search shows no high-priority targets in Area 1, the section of ocean shore closest to the Nova Scotia mainland. Rather than send divers down to investigate lower priority targets, the team agrees to move further out and begin a grid pattern search of Area 2.
Attention bridge, this is control. We have a strong target return.
Target detection is one thing. Going down and confirming what the target is much harder indeed. We were actually getting returns of some of the very large kelp beds that produce shadows and images that were misleading. The environment presents perhaps the main challenge in doing a thorough search. Extreme current conditions are almost constant. What was the current like down there?
The current's building up. It's going to get worse.
Conditions are deteriorating. It's my feeling that we should move on and perhaps check other targets.
But the divers press on, eliminating all of the potential targets in Area 2. The search then moves on to the deeper waters of Area 3. In Area 3, there are a number of high-priority targets worthy of investigation. The divers begin a systematic search, working into the night when a particularly promising spike hits on radar.
Control, we are approaching target area.
In the control room, the team watches the divers' progress. Individual propulsion systems and high-powered underwater lights assist the divers who are fighting increasing tidal currents and a backwash of silt from the ocean floor. As the divers close in on their bearing, they realize that the ocean currents are distorting sonar readings, giving a high-priority signal to nothing more than an unusual rock formation. The team is disappointed, but Chris Stiles is undaunted. He has eliminated 3 crash sites and can now move forward to another area where some government eyewitnesses have told him UFO debris may still be found.
I've spoken with several of the divers in the past and other support naval personnel that were involved in this, and early on they told me the story of the Shelburne connection, and it just keeps resurfacing. It's a story that won't go away.
That story when Sightings continues. Admittedly, Sightings is searching for an extraterrestrial needle in a haystack by diving beneath the waters of Shag Harbour, Nova Scotia. Even if the APRO document is a roadmap to a submerged UFO, we don't know what the craft is made out of. Would UFO debris rust, melt, or could it be that someone has simply beaten us to it? When the sighting search and salvage operation failed to turn up UFO wreckage or debris in 3 significant areas off the coast of Shag Harbour, Chris Stiles did not give up his investigation. He feels there is simply too much information about the mysterious UFO crash of October 4th, 1967, to abandon his search for the truth. First, there was consistent testimony from credible eyewitnesses.
We see lights moving through the sky that we thought to be an airplane at first. And there was 4 in sequence. 1 would come on, then 2, then 3, then 4.
It was reddish orange in colour, and they seemed to be on about a 45-degree incline, and the lights seemed to be going in a downward motion.
This thing headed down, crashed on the water, and at that time all the lights went off, and 1 other light came on a few minutes later, and that's the light that was there when I arrived on the scene.
Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer Ron Pond not only saw the Shag Harbour UFO, he also interviewed eyewitnesses at the scene.
There were witnesses coming from a variety of directions and in different locations, so there was no way that it was a conspiracy or any kind of an attempt to mislead anybody. It was definitely something that came down in the water.
In addition to credible eyewitnesses, Chris Stiles has uncovered a trail of documentation, leading him to conclude that the U.S. and Canadian governments knew about and monitored the Shag Harbour UFO.
The more we find, the more there is, sources of even the paper trail in this have hardly dried up.
And there was this exclusive interview with a member of the Canadian military who had been debriefed as part of a Shag Harbour naval recovery operation.
I was told that it had hit the water, crash-landed, in trouble, and had actually moved underwater, and I think that was one of the more interesting points that I found of the whole story, because this thing was not only aerodynamic, but hydrodynamic also. It had the capacity to travel in 2 mediums.
According to this source, the UFO continued traveling underwater and finally came to rest several miles from the impact site.
Near where the UFO had moved, there was a high top-secret listening post for submarine detection.
This claim of a second location of an unidentified flying object resting on the bottom, somewhere off Government Point in the water, is very interesting, because this location was the spot where Canadian Forces Station Shelburne was located.
It is quite possible that there is something laying down there. Somewhere between the crash site to the site that it moved, it's hard to move that amount of physical energy around and not leave some sort of a trace.
Because Sightings' initial scientific search of Shag Harbour failed to turn up any debris, Stiles is now exploring the possibility that the crash site was 25 miles to the north, near Shelburne. It was here that a second Navy dive reportedly took place on the night of the crash.
When I spoke to the divers and support personnel early on, they told me that at the Shelburne end of the operation, where they sat over this craft for a week, that it was on the bottom and that there was still activity in it. Furthermore, there was a second craft there which was lending assistance. They believed that this was a vehicle of extraterrestrial origin. And these men had lengthy experience.
Their commanding officer would debrief them and tell them not to open their mouth. The story would not be discussed again. I can only imagine that he would assign some people to ensure that those people do keep quiet.
Although he has uncovered a mountain of documentation confirming civilian sightings of the Shag Harbour UFO, Stiles has found almost nothing on paper to confirm military operations in Shelburne or Government Point.
I've looked at some unique strategies and tried to be creative. For example, off Government Point, there's an area called McNutt Island, which has a manned lighthouse. I attempted to obtain the lighthouse logs, thinking that perhaps any naval operation that kept ships in the area for 7 days would show in the lightkeeper's records. These were not forthcoming. Attempts with the Coast Guard to get these seemed to indicate that these records were lost. It seems that I could get earlier records and those after, but October's were missing.
It is Stiles' belief that considerable work remains to be done in the Shag Harbour UFO investigation. Raw data needs to be analyzed further, and uncharted target sites offshore must be scanned. The elimination of 3 potential impact sites during the first Sightings salvage operation is only the first step to what may be a very long road.
Shag Harbour is still a mystery. However, I feel that this case will reveal a lot about the nature of the UFO phenomena and may have some answers that even challenge our established belief systems.
It's only been since late 1994 that the Canadian military has allowed civilian operations in the waters off Government Point. Chris Stiles now plans to focus future operations in the area near Shelburne, Nova Scotia.